person who gets the deal isn't necessarily the person who has the relationship. It's the person who's top of mind.
Absolutely.
That's really who it is. So like even realtors who like, I've been in the business 30 years. I have investor relationships out the wazoo. I'm just the guy who texts them right when they get the listing agreement. They're going to be like, okay, send it.
It's easy. Hey everybody, thank you for joining us for today's episode of Real Estate Disruptors. Today we have Jonah Korchin with Asetla Investments, and Jonah flew in from Denver, Colorado, talk about how he's doing $1 million this year through micro flipping and agent outreach. Now I'm on a mission to create 100 millionaires. The information on the show alone is enough to help you become a millionaire in the next 5 to 7 years. If you'll take consistent action, you will become one. And the show is brought to you by our sister company, InvestorLift. Get access to millions of cash buyers across the country. Go to investorlift.com, put in Disruptors to get 10% off. And guys, if you get value out of this show, don't keep us a secret. Please share, please subscribe. Let other people know what you're learning here. That way we can all grow together. So you ready?
I'm ready as ever.
All right, cool.
I'm happy.
So what was your life like right before you got into real estate?
My life was kind of a mess. I mean, so here's my story. So I graduated college, went into the Peace Corps, and then COVID happened. So basically, Peace Corps, I left the Peace Corps, and then I was kind of lost for a while, right? I was a little bit lost. I always had this entrepreneurial vision and dream of like what I wanted to do. But I did all sorts of different stuff. So I did, like, Gary Vee. Have you ever seen his like flipping garage sale stuff?
Yeah.
I did that. I did like a lot of side venture stuff where I'm like, this is not going to make me rich at all. This just isn't going to make me rich. I eventually go to a real estate investor meetup and I learn about wholesaling. And once I learn about wholesaling, I'm like, wow, this is it.
Yeah.
This is the best business model ever created, ever. I don't need any money. I don't need to be Steve Jobs and create a product. I just need to be able to relate to other human beings and solve their problems and then sell a contract. I knew I could do that.
Yeah.
And so I was like very lost, not sure what to do. But then when I started hearing about wholesaling, I'm like, that's the one. That was the business I was looking for and just didn't know about it.
So you went to college for what?
Econ and poli-sci.
Okay.
Econ helps. Poli-sci, not really. Like a little bit, but not really.
Yeah. And then you went to the Peace Corps. So you were saying you were lost. And you're basically trying all these different things.
Yeah. It was like stocks, flipping, like garage sale flipping, like all the sorts of things where I'm like, how in the world is any of this going to actually make me rich? The issue with stocks is it takes a long time to make money. Garage sale flipping, that's impossible to scale, right? And like you're not going to make that much. Right. There's still, funny enough, in my mom's attic, there's still a bunch of stuff up there to this day. But
okay, so then you go to this meetup. You were saying this is right around COVID?
It was literally right before COVID. I got the timeline wrong. It was like literally I go to the meetup. It's maybe March of 2020, and I think April or May was when it like everything started shutting down. So it's like literally like COVID's starting to get into the news, but there's no laws that have passed or anything. And I just start learning about real estate right then.
And this is in Denver?
This was in California. So I'm from California. I moved to Denver a year ago.
Okay.
Just because I wanted to, and I can do whatever now. But this was in California. This was in San Francisco. So yeah, like I'm starting to learn about wholesaling, and then COVID hits. And honestly, for me, I feel like that was one of the best things to happen for me in my journey because it forced me to not hang out with any of my friends who were not entrepreneurs, right? Because I was living with my parents. They're not like insanely old or anything, but they're old enough where I was a little worried about COVID, like giving it to them. So I just was like, all right, well, this seems to be the perfect time to just grind. So yeah, no. Anyways, that's how I started and that's how it went.
Okay. So what did you do? You go to the meetup. I'm going to wholesale. What'd you do after that?
So immediately I start going on YouTube. I hear about it. They talk about wholesaling and they say, look it up, go onto YouTube. First person I find is Max Maxwell. He's just the first one. I think he was really blowing up at that time.
He had the biggest reach.
Yeah, he had like the biggest reach, especially in 2020. So I was just like watching a ton of his stuff. He was talking about driving for dollars and cold calling and different stuff. So I started with just driving for dollars. I had a really Can I swear? I don't know if I can swear. A really bad Scion XA, a 2004 Scion XA that was
That's not the box. That's the.
it's basically a box.
Okay.
It's not like a box, but anyways, people can look it up. But it's like a curved box, more or less. And I'm driving around different places in the Bay Area doing driving for dollars. And something I was telling you about, which I'm really excited to be on this podcast for this, is I was listening to your podcast. I was listening to Real Estate Disruptors while I was doing driving for dollars, right? I had what's the really deal machine? Deal machine. I had Deal Machine, was doing that, signed up for it, was sending postcards and all that. And I mean, while that was happening, I was just listening to Real Estate Disruptors over and over and over again with different people who I now get to know, like Carlos Reyes, Pace Morby, Jamil Damji, and like all of these people. And so, yeah, man, it's a cool full circle to be on Real Estate Disruptors specifically, because I knew you before Jamil and Pace, who are now like my main mentors because I'm part of Sub 2 and Astro and their programs.
Right.
But it's an awesome full circle to do it. But to answer your question, I did driving for dollars. That's what I was doing. And then also I started doing just mojo dialing, cold calling.
Yeah. So how was it? You're doing this in San Francisco?
I'm doing it in the surrounding areas. So if anyone knows San Francisco, there's the actual city, which is a peninsula. I live in the East Bay. I live in a town called El Cerrito. It's like north of Berkeley. For anyone who knows these areas, that's where they're at. But I was doing it mainly in the East Bay, just driving around there because the city of San Francisco is crowded, congested, not like a place you really want to be doing that much driving for dollars. You want to go to like the suburbs where there's like, that's where buyers like it more too, as I've learned in my journey.
Gotcha. Okay. So you're driving for dollars, sending postcards, and you're also doing mojo.
Yeah.
Which one turns into your first deal?
Cold calling. Cold calling turns into it. So my journey, funny enough, is I do it for about a month. And then I remember just being like, I'm not going to sign up for any guru's program. We're not doing it. I'm way too broke. I probably made $5,000 to my name ever, like in total of all the money I've ever made, because I was a college student and a Peace Corps volunteer, and they don't pay you anything. So I have basically nothing in the bank account. But then I'm cold calling, and then an ad pops up from Josiah, because this was back when Josiah was running that program and not Jamil. And the ad's like, I just remember basically it was like, so like, there's a new way of wholesaling where you don't have to cold call anybody. And I'm like, interesting. I'll click the ad. Then I click the ad. I get the sales pitch. I get closed. I put it all on a 0% interest credit card where I'm like, all right, I got a year to get a deal. I should be able to do it if I do the program. And I start learning, and they're mainly agent outreach and micro flipping, which we'll get into. But I stick to direct to seller, and they've done direct to seller before, so they still give me the advice. So I did get it from cold calling, and we can get into my first deal. But Josiah was extremely helpful, actually, like helping me get that, because it was pretty nightmarish, very bad.
Why was it nightmarish?
So here was the story. So basically, there was a woman. It was like a condo in Antioch, which is like the very outskirts of San Francisco, like if people know that area. And it turns into a nightmare deal, basically, just because I just didn't feel like I knew what I was doing. So this woman was selling. Her place is actually incredibly nice, probably remodeled in 2010, like needs just updating. Could have easily listed it and gotten money, but she really needed to sell really quickly because she had like a family situation in like New Jersey or something like that. So she was willing to take a discount. And I screwed up the ARV classically because I didn't know with condos, if you're not in the same HOA, and even if a condo might even be in the same subdivision, but it's a completely different HOA, then the ARV is gonna be different, right? So I'm probably like 30-ish K off of the ARV of where like I thought it would be at, which was very annoying. And so it just was like, it was just it was so annoying because like I had to do like 3 showings. This woman is like, what is this guy doing right now? Why is he like constantly showing up? Because I didn't know how to set expectations with the seller yet. Like it was just like the first deal. I have to end up renegotiating 10K, which is just not a fun thing to do on your first deal.
Right.
And just, I had like a buyer at one point, and then they backed out, and then I had to find another buyer who put in the EMD, and they, thank God, they closed. But it was just like, for a first timer, it was just a very rough deal to start with.
Doesn't sound that different than like your average deal.
I know.
It could just be because it was your first deal.
Exactly.
Right. So your expectations, because like we make it look pretty easy on social media, right?
Right.
Like it's pretty simple. Like, oh, you just go and get this person who's interested in a little offer, and then you show it to some people, and then you close and you get this fat check.
Yeah.
Which is what we all desire. We all yearn for the fat check. But then the emotional roller coaster behind all of it
is so much. And it was just so much because I was just doing it by myself. Like, I just felt so bad because she had that family situation. I had to renegotiate 10K, and I'm like, God damn it, I hate that I have to do this. But like, also, there just was no room in it at all, or I just wouldn't have made any money on that one. And I was starving for money because I had put the whole program on like a credit card.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was just rough, but we got it done. And yeah, that was my first deal, made $9,900 exactly. And I still have a check up in my little office in my house. So
very cool. Well,
that was the story. I definitely cashed it. I definitely cashed it. No, I definitely cashed it. I definitely I mobile deposited it so that I could keep the check, because I was like, I want to keep this. I want a reminder of my first deal, where it's like the first one I made. And
that's awesome.
It's
so
crazy.
That was cold call Mojo. Did you cold call like the Driving for Dollars lead, or did you call like a different list?
No, I actually I never ended up closing a deal from the Driving for Dollars lead.
Okay, so who'd you call?
So I called just a list. It was just lists off PropStream, like tax liens,
Gotcha.
pre-foreclosures. I think she was a tax lien. I think she had like a tiny tax lien, but that wasn't even her motivation at all.
Yeah.
But she had like a small tax lien randomly.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So it wasn't even a strong pain point.
No.
That was a pain indicator, but had no reason why she was
It
selling.
had nothing to do with why she was selling,
Okay.
which was nice.
So you're doing direct to seller outreach. You sign up for Astro, which is not about, the focus is not direct to seller.
Not at all.
So did you continue the direct to seller route, or did you modify?
So here's what happened. So basically, I get that $10,000 check, right? And Jamil and Pace are best of friends, obviously, right? Like, they're just homies and homies. And Pace had come on a few times into Astro, and he had like just started sub 2. I think he started in May, and this deal closed in July. And I just knew, like, I felt it when I saw Pace talk. I'm like, I thought creative financing was super interesting. I was like, that is super cool, because I really want to own houses at some point, and I want to know how to do it that way instead of having to use a bank and go the normal traditional route. So instead of paying off the credit card, I just doubled down and give the $10,000 to Pace, basically. And I'm just like, screw it. Like, with two mentors, I'm just gonna get the deal again anyways, right? But what happens is, I start learning the Astro method, which is through agents and micro flipping and stuff. And I also start learning the direct to seller method even more with Pace. And then what happens is I try to create basically 2 businesses at the same time. People don't get this. Direct to agent is not like cold calling and texting. It's like flipping and wholesaling. They're 2 different businesses, in my opinion. And so if really what needs to happen is 30 realtors need to be called in order to get a deal, or 30 sellers, what was happening was 15 and 15. You probably know this, have noticed this, is there's a certain threshold where it's like tons of deals. But if you don't hit the threshold, then you just get no deals. So what happened was, I tried to do all the methods at the same time. And then I just didn't get another deal for 8 months.
Oh.
Yeah, which was rough. And I'm like, this 0% interest is like starting to wear off around me. And what happens is I decide, okay, well, I literally don't have any more money to skip trace anything anymore. So we're going to go the agent route because it's fully free. And then maybe within 2 weeks of deciding that, I get like a $20,000 deal. Because
you fully commit to it.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you not have stimmy money to roll through this?
That was like, what, $400?
That it?
Yeah, that was it. That's all I got. It was like $400. It's not going to do anything. I skip trace one list maybe. The stimmy money didn't help at all. But the real stimmy money, I would have had to start my business in like 2019, and then you would have gotten like the PPP loans or whatever.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. So you go from broke, put this on a credit card. I'm not gonna get a guru, but okay, I'll get one guru.
And then I get two.
And then you close the deal. It's like, all right, I'm gonna get a second guru. I'm gonna double down. And look, guys, like for everyone that's listening, right? Like we're talking like this is 2020.
Yeah.
3 years ago.
Yep.
Right. So all right, so you go commit to agent outreach.
Yep.
So then what happened after that?
So I commit to agent outreach. The business does way, 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 way better. That year, revenue was, I think, $500,000, I'm pretty sure. And it was literally just me. That was only me just doing agent outreach. Around the middle of 2021, I guess we're at that point, I hire my first VA, which is just an admin VA, just someone who pulls the lists and stuff. And we close out the year, just me and him just doing deals. And basically I'm like, okay, I'm finally committed to one thing. I phased out the direct to seller. This is working really well. I'd rather just focus on it and just make a ton of money. Because my focus that year was just to be like, I just want a ton of money. I want to be able to put some into a bank account, which was cool until tax time came around the next year. Because I'm living in California, I just made $500,000 my overhead because it's agent outreach. There's like no costs. The only overhead I had was I also paid for masterminds of Jamil's and masterminds of Pace's, and then also I joined like a $30,000 mastermind. Those were like all my overhead. So my costs were like $150,000. So I made $350K in profit. And then next year I was like, wow, I have a $150K tax bill, which I'm like, Jesus Christ. And then Pace starts talking more about like, yeah, dude, you should try to buy some real estate. And I'm like, damn, I really need to buy some real estate. So the next year, I still mainly focus on the wholesaling because it was like taking up my time trying to figure it out. And I started like scaling and I start hiring more people, hiring VAs, hiring my first acquisition managers. But in where are we at now? We're at like the end of 2021. That's when I bought my first rental, which was good. But yeah, so I kind of already forgot your question. I don't know.
Well, let's talk about, so you're doing agent outreach, right? So
Yeah.
you're doing lots of deals. Now, this is all in the San Francisco area?
This is all in Northern California, almost exclusively. There were like a few random ones in other places. Like I think I did one in New Mexico, but mostly California.
Okay, so you're calling the realtors at this time. This is before agent outreach got really, really hot. So talk to me about like what were the reactions from realtors when you were calling? Because this is a hot market.
Yeah, California is a hot market.
Right. So you're calling a hot market. Like what were your challenges in that model?
The challenges in the agent outreach model always is just building rapport with the agents and having them understand your value. I think that's the thing that most wholesalers miss is what is your value as a wholesaler to an agent, right? I think really wholesalers and most people in general are always just thinking about how can I benefit from this transaction, right? And you really need to think about, okay, what value am I actually bringing to this agent, right? And that's how I kind of developed what I call the Scorch method, which is my method of doing agent outreach. It's slightly different than anybody else's that I've personally ever heard of because it's so much more focused on really directing to the solving of the seller's problem and the agent's problem, but I don't say that. And the reason is most people are like, call an agent and are like, hey, I'm a real estate investor. I'm looking for fixers. What do you got? Right?
About me.
Yeah, like, right? And like, I mean, I know you were an agent at some point, like before you
Still
were
technically
even
licensed, but yeah.
yes, but you were like an agent. I bet you got those calls, right? Yeah. And probably when you heard that call, you're like, okay, cool, bro. Like whoever the hell you are on the phone, right? And so what I've started doing to really make myself different is what I'll do is like, so let's say I'm calling you. It's like usually I start with texting outreach. So generally you've already decided that you're down to talk to me for a couple of minutes. And so a conversation would go something like this. I'll be like, hey, Steve, this is Jonah. Thank you so much for taking my call. I know you're super busy. You're a realtor in Northern California, right? And then you would say yes,
Mhm.
hopefully. I like asking that question because sometimes they're a realtor in Arizona or they're just not a realtor at all, right? And you don't want to waste time. Usually they say yes. I always teach my people, just assume you're talking to the right person until that question, because there's no point in being like, how much, like, do you have a second or whatever? Like they already told you they want to talk to you.
Mhm.
And then I really go into my favorite line ever, which is my tool in the tool belt line. It's like, amazing. Great to hear you're a realtor in Northern California. What I do better than anybody else is I solve sellers' problems. So if you ever hear of one where there are tax liens, it's in pre-foreclosure, there's no equity, whatever it might be, my goal is to be the tool in your tool belt that
Mhm.
you use to solve that problem and get you your commission. Um, and do you know of any like that right now? Right? I love that line because it does a few different things. One, it shows you have a competent business model that's a
Mhm.
little bit different than just a flipper.
Yeah.
Two, you're showing your heart and you're like, oh, like an agent here's like, oh, like maybe he's like actually cares about sellers and cares about other human beings. He's not just a money guy. Um, I would say those are like the main two things that it does that really separates you. And then you got to ask, like, do you know of anything right now? Right. And then there could be like a myriad of response. Sometimes they'll have something, you collect the info. Sometimes they don't have anything. Sometimes they start going to like, okay, but like, how much do you need off of the property? And I'm like, wait. I don't think you just heard me. I can give you my technical criteria, but what I'm really looking for are sellers with problems. That is my criteria,
Mhm.
right? And there's just a bunch of different responses. But the last thing I like to end it with, and these are the 4 steps to an intro call we're starting to get into, is undying appreciation. So I think the thing that this world is missing most right now is the fact that nobody gets appreciated.
Mhm.
So many people go throughout their lives and like doing like if even like as a waiter, waitress, like they don't get appreciated for anything. They get a tip, but nobody's like, "Thank you so much, you did a great job." Right? I think very few people get that. So when you start giving that to agents, especially, but you really anybody, it creates a memory, it creates a connection. They're like, damn, I really like that guy. So I'd end it with something like, hey, thank you so much for taking the time. It means a lot. I cannot wait to get a deal with you, Steve. Let's get it. Right?
Yeah.
Something like that. So 4 steps, introduce yourself, ask if they're a realtor. My tool in the tool belt line. Do you actually know of anything right now? And then undying appreciation. And I feel
Yeah.
like that's my competitive advantage in the agent outreach space.
Well, and for sure the appreciation component, because that's the thing that we focus the most on in our sales training is the validation,
Hmm.
right? People want to be validated. And that what that looks like is appreciated, seen, heard, felt, right? Felt like people understand them. Like there's all these elements. If we can convey all that, then they're more likely to want to do business with us.
Right.
But if we're not conveying all these things, now it's transactional,
Yeah.
and no one likes transactional. The other thing too, on the flip side of that, if you look at the reason why most employees quit the organization they work at and why most spouses cheat is lack of appreciation,
Yeah, I bet. That makes sense.
right? So if you're not appreciating, this is when their eyes start wandering.
Yeah.
So you're doing the opposite of that, which is you're appreciating them, you're seeing them, you're treating them as humans that have their own needs that need to be met.
100%.
And the other thing I liked about that you're talking about as far as so you can get your commission, right? Is like realtor wants to get paid,
Yeah, 100%.
right? So hey, like can you who do you know that has this situation? I'm a tool in the tool belt to solve the seller's problems, so that you can get your commission, right?
Yeah.
It's not like hey, like we're here to solve sellers' problems. It's important, and also solve your problem.
Yeah, exactly.
We don't we don't what's the word I'm looking for? You're not hammering it, but you're not dismissing it
Exactly. Because I mean that's what realtors want, right? Like I'm here to solve everyone's problems. What I out loud say is sellers' problems, because it would sound weird to say realtors' problems.
either.
That would sound weird in the pitch. But like, yeah, exactly. Like you want to include that commission part because then they know, okay, great, I'm also going to get
Yeah.
paid for helping him out.
Yeah, I'm trying to think back like when I used to get a lot of calls. Um, Not to say I don't get calls anymore. It's just everything goes to voicemail now.
Yeah.
But when I used to take calls as a realtor
Yeah.
and I have investors call, I remember. Well, let's go back even further. When I first got into the business, man, it was so exciting. Cash buyers want to work with me. This is incredible, right? When you're new, oh my God, this is awesome. Then you realize it doesn't mean anything, right?
Right.
Then it gets to a point where like, hey, I want to do this. And I remember the very first time someone was like, I don't like working with realtors because if it's a good deal, they won't sell it to me. I was like, that doesn't make sense. Like we get paid commission.
Yeah.
Right. Now, he's absolutely right. If I have a good deal, why would I sell it to an investor? Why wouldn't I just do it myself, right? But this is kind of like the evolution.
Right, of course. It depends on the person.
Depends on where they are in their journey.
Exactly.
Right. I'm at a point in my journey now where it doesn't make sense for me to sell those deals for a commission.
Right.
Right. But the one thing you're talking about, like you're having this conversation, you're doing text outreach. I can say, and you probably experienced realtors like myself. I'd be nice. I'd be cordial. Oh, nice. I was cordial and professional. But if you weren't willing to come to my office and have a consultation, you weren't getting my deals.
So here's how I get
Okay.
around that and it depends on the person, right? Because every person is different. But what I've noticed is, so like, let's say if you had said, hey, you have to come to my office, usually what I would say to that is like, hey, I'm going to be super honest with you. I live in Colorado. I don't live in Phoenix, but I do deals here, just so you know. But and this was at the beginning. I stopped doing this. I actually haven't gotten this objection in a while. But like what I would usually do is like, it's like, hey, like we can do a Zoom though, or anything like that. But honestly, what I've started noticing for most realtors is they'll say that, and then I'll be like, yeah, like I can check my calendar later, whatever. And then what I do is I just keep following up over and over and over and over and over and over again. I have realtors who have been texted by my CRM number every 2 weeks for the past 3 years. No lie, right? We might have not done any business, but like I'm definitely in their mind, right? And so if they ever do get a deal, I've just learned that like the person who gets the deal isn't necessarily the person who has the relationship. It's the person who's top of mind.
Absolutely.
That's really who it is. So like even realtors who like, I've been in the business 30 years. I have investor relationships out the wazoo. I'm just the guy who texts them right when they get the listing agreement. They're going to be like, okay, send it.
It's easy.
Right. And then they get a check immediately within 2 weeks. They had to do nothing, like literally no work. They had to write up an offer maybe, or they let my TC write it up. So usually that's what would end up happening with a realtor like that, who's like, I need you to come to the office. I never went to anybody's office, but I've done deals with people like that because in the end it's like, well, he's texting me right now. I guess this is perfect.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
You asked the question, do you know anybody that's going through this? What's your success rate with that question?
Do you know anybody who's going through
Who has sales problems?
It just depends. I mean, it really depends if they actually know of anything at that moment. I'll be honest, I don't have like in my head an immediate well, actually I do have a KPI in a way because it's about my AC managers have about 30 conversations a day, follow-ups and intro calls, right? And they generate about 6 to 8 leads from those. So I guess that would be the conversion rate.
Yeah. So I'm curious because do you know, it's a yes, no question.
Yeah.
Get shot down versus like, hey, who do you know that might, or who comes to mind, right?
Interesting.
That might have these challenges, right? Because it's like, as a realtor, I would say, hey, Jonah, do you know anyone that's looking to buy or sell? Like, I can't think of anybody. It's like, hey, Jonah, who do you know that's recently had a baby, just gotten married, or the kid's gone off to college? Now, a described person that's got these problems, and it's more easy, it's easier to
visualize,
think of a person who's gone through these things. It's like, do you know anyone that's looking to buy or sell? Because like no one says, hey, I want to buy or sell. Do you know anyone? That's not a normal conversation.
I'll try that out. Do you know? The question is, do you know of anybody who has that problem? So usually I've found the realtors pause and think about it for a second, but I'll try it out. I'll try it out with like, who do you know who has these types of problems?
Because it's an open-ended question.
Yeah.
And now they got to really
think about it. I'll try it out.
Yeah. Just curious.
Yeah.
So, all right. So we go through, that's 2021. All right. So 2021, make $500,000.
Mm-hmm.
Only expenses is the guru stuff.
Yeah, basically, more or less.
Right.
And like whatever I can technically write off,
So then 2022 was also a really interesting year. So how did your business?
2022 was interesting. So 2022 I would count as like the year of like learning how to scale, right? 2021 was like, it's just me, one VA. Let's just go as hard as we possibly can, right? And then 2022 is like, okay, let's actually try to make a business out of this. Let's like start hiring people, see what happens. I have a whole team, like 4 or 5 VAs. I had like 2 or 3 act managers and a dispo manager and a TC, right? I had like an actual team in place. The issue is I didn't know how to run a team at all. Zero experience, zero knowledge. I've done salesy stuff throughout my entire life. So it's one thing when it's just you in the business.
Yeah.
I had experience with sales and how to close people and all of that, and I have the personality for it. I'd never had any experience ever managing people or hiring or how to choose the right people or what to pay them or anything like that, right? Like I had no idea. I didn't know what I was doing, right? I'd ask Pace and Jamil and other mentors that I had, but there's only so much you can learn from them. You just sometimes have to make some of the mistakes yourself. So that year, it actually ended up being only a little bit more revenue. It was like $525,000. And then the profit was less because I had to pay people this time around, right? I actually had employees and stuff. So the profit was probably like 150 to 200, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
So that year was just learning like, okay, how did we make a business? What the hell is an SOP? Where do you even put your SOPs? How do you do this? Where do you find people, right? And 2022 was just like the struggle of that. I got a business coach. There were just a lot more expenses of, okay, let's try to make this big, because you can like make 350K in this business a year easily just you grinding it out, right? If like a possible retirement plan could have just been, I do that for 10 years. I have, like 2-3 million in the bank, maybe buy some real estate or maybe put it in or maybe even lend it out, live off that for the rest of my life, right?
Yeah.
But I didn't really want to do that, right? I want to become really freaking rich because I want to be able to impact more people's lives, right? So you got to like just learn all that extra stuff. So 2022 was really good. Bought another rental, did just a lot more wholesaling again. That was like most of 2022 was just keep learning that journey.
So 2022 is a year of scale,
Mm-hmm.
and you're learning how to hire people, manage them, this and that.
Yeah.
What were the biggest mistakes you made?
This is my opinion on this, and it's really interesting because when you were on my podcast, you actually said, no, this is like not necessarily true. You can hire people whose maybe their personalities don't necessarily fit the role. So my biggest lesson that I feel like I learned was what I was doing a lot of times was I'd hire somebody I like, but didn't have the experience for the role or the personality for the role. So, for instance, now when I hire salespeople, I want them to have sales experience, and I want to almost be being sold during the interview. They should be confident. They should be like able to express themselves and talk well in an interview if they're a salesperson, and vice versa. I'd sometimes hire people who were incredible in interviews, great talkers for an admin role. You know what I mean? And it's just like, oh, you're disorganized just like me. This is a freaking issue, right? That was like probably the greatest mistake, in my opinion, is you gotta, even more important than the experience is matching the personality to the job role. I feel like was the greatest mistake that I made as someone who was running a business. And then also, you have to have your systems really well dialed in if you're going to have a team, right? Things can if you have an okay system as a solopreneur, it works because you're doing everything anyways, right? But if you actually have employees, they need to understand what's going on with the system or where you need to go with the system, right? So those were easily the two. I feel like those were the two biggest lessons. There were a lot of lessons on like how to, like how to be a really good boss who's gracious, even if you feel incredibly frustrated with whatever the employee's doing, right? But yeah, I'd say those two were like the biggest lessons.
Talk more about that. So being gracious, even though you're on the inside, not feeling so positive.
So like, I mean, there might be a thing where it's like, bro, you're like the act manager. Why didn't you bring in any deals this month, right? Like, what the hell is going on, right? And learning how to be like, even if you're frustrated and the person isn't doing the job, learning how to be gracious in realizing. I read the book called it's by Jocko Willink. What's it called? It's Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink. This book, it's all about how he's like a Navy SEALs commander, and what made him really unique or a really good leader is, in the end, everything is his fault. Right. And that's something I didn't understand about leadership is like, no. If the act manager isn't getting deals, it's your fault, not their fault. Everything in the organization starts with you as the leader, and you have to internalize that it's not that they're not doing their job, it's that you're not doing your job to give them the success that they need, right? And even if they aren't able to do the job, then it's still your fault that you didn't fire them, right? Everything in the end is your fault as the CEO, as the leader of the organization, whatever it is. And so once I started changing that view of how it works, it helped me get less frustrated too, because I realized if I truly internalize that, then I am the one responsible. How can I be frustrated at them? I have to be frustrated at myself if I'm anybody. So then learning just how to be gracious with them and how it just doesn't help at all to get frustrated. Getting frustrated doesn't help at all. It doesn't solve anything. The problem is still there. So you got to solve the problem. That's the purpose. You getting frustrated doesn't help with that. What needs to happen is, okay, what's the issue? Why aren't we getting anything? And then back then it would be like, well, this helped a lot with a business coach who helped me realize this. It's like, well, Jonah, what are their numbers? I'm like, what do you mean, what are their numbers? They're calling people all the time. I'm like, it's like, no. You have to like track what the hell they're doing.
Or all the metrics.
Or like, where are the metrics? And I'm like, I knew about KPIs, but when you're a solopreneur and you're just like doing it, like in my head, it's just like, what do you mean? I just make calls and eventually deals happen.
Yeah.
But then I eventually learned that the reason why you want KPIs is, so especially with employees, you can see what they're doing. You can then identify the problem. So like if you see the intro calls are fine and the like if you see that the calls are fine, like they're making enough calls, but the leads are low, then it's like, okay, there's something wrong with like the conversion part of like, what are you actually saying on the phone? And then we review the calls. It's like, oh, you're not asking them if they have anything right now, right? That's the issue, right? We actually are able to identify the problem.
Right.
And so that was like, that was another huge lesson, was like learning like how KPIs work, why you use them. And then also it creates predictability. And that's really important for California in general, because how California works generally is it'll be like, especially this was how it was when I was a solopreneur, it would be like 10K month, 30K month, 150K month, because there'd be like one whale deal, right? Because you're dealing with these $1 million houses. And then it would be like 10K month, 30K month, 0 month, 150K month. And it would just be like, these whale deals. So like learning how to do the KPIs so I have that predictability where I'm like, no. 30 conversations equals about 6 to 8 leads equals about 1 deal a week. And my company has consistently been doing that because we've been sticking to our KPIs.
Yeah. One thing, just going back a little bit, you were talking about scaling, right? So like, you don't need great communication when it's just you.
Yeah.
You really don't need excellent communication when it's you and one other person is in the same room.
Yep.
Once you get past that room,
Yeah.
then things get super chaotic.
Yep.
So 2022 is a year of scale. What's 2023?
2023. So the first half of it was a really interesting year. The year of 2023 really was, I'm wondering what like the best word for it. For me, it was learning how to bring in partners. I know we've had this conversation actually where like, I know your whole situation with your partnership, right? But like I had a very fixed mindset of like, I must own 100% of my company. Like, why would I ever give 50% away? That doesn't ever make sense in any circumstance. But I started realizing that my business was getting to the point where I was the integrator stuff, the things like the creating the CRMs and all of that. that was exhausting me. It was exhausting my energy every single day. And my gut was telling me I had to solve this problem somehow. There are really only two ways to do it. One is hire a COO, or one is partner up with an integrator. And there was this guy, his name's Tyler Wanaka, who's now my business partner. But I had to, I don't know how to explain it, but like people who are religious would say it was God. I'm not particularly religious. I think it's just like gut instinct and the universe and all of that. But I remember I was at Jamil's mastermind and we were doing a prayer, and it basically came to me as a vision of like, for me to get everything I want or all my goals, I need to partner up with Tyler. I could tell he was the right guy. We had already partnered up on a agent outreach CRM at the end of 2022 called Simple Send, where it's our CRM. It's based completely off my method. My business uses it. And we partnered up, created that, and it just went incredibly smoothly. Everybody did their roles. I worked with them super well. We were able to get so much done so much quicker. And I'm like, wow, what if my entire business was like this, where somebody was dealing with the integrator stuff, right? So the first half of 2023 was like pretty mediocre, to be honest. I think it was like probably averaged like 30 or 40K a month, which was even lower than what was in 2022. And then we partnered up in about the end of May, beginning of June. And then so far since then, we've been skyrocketing. Like right, like the third quarter, we did, I think like 320K, something like that. This quarter, probably with everything, we're going to do like 400 to 500K. So then mix that in with other deals that I have coming in and other projects I've been doing that aren't part of just the wholesaling. It'll probably end up being like $1 million a year. So it'll be double anything I've ever done. I had to give up half the company. So probably to me, it might still be about the same, but I see the trajectory where next year we'll be able to even maybe double that, right? So
You said you knew Tyler was the person. How did you know Tyler was the person?
Intuition. I don't really know how to say it other than that. It was, so he had been selling my deals for all of 2020, he got into the business about mid 2021. And he was also part of Astro. And he, around the end of 2021, he started selling a lot of my deals a lot quicker than I can. Because I think disposition wholesaling, which is basically where you focus on buyer outreach and focusing on buyers and getting people like me, acquisition wholesalers, buyers, that's really good for integrators. That's really good for people who are insanely good with systems and computers and CRMs and all that stuff. Because for me to get out a deal, because the system's wonky, like I might send out an email blast and then accidentally send the text to all the realtors or something like that, right? It's like, we got to figure this out. But he would get a deal sold within like a day or two, even quicker than I could sometimes get it out. I'm like, probably sold 20 of my deals before we started partnering up, because I was like, okay, you are better than me at this. Like, you're really, really good at this. So I knew partially because of that, and I knew also because all those deals, me and him work together really smoothly. We have similar personalities, similar ethics, and opposite skill sets.
Yeah.
Which is exactly, if you are going to partner up, what you want to do, right? Because the worst thing to do is to partner up with someone who's exactly like me, right? That's the worst thing that could possibly ever happen. It's the mistake that everybody makes. They just partner with their friend. I love Tyler, and now he's my friend, but I don't know if we would have naturally been friends if we weren't in real estate together. But because we're such good partners, we've become friends, and then we've been able to create this cool business.
Gotcha.
So,
and we talk about micro flipping.
Mm-hmm.
So expand on how you're running a business.
So micro flipping basically is where you take an acquisition wholesaler, an acquisition wholesaler gets a deal, you sign a non-exclusive option with them, which gives you equitable interest is what it's called, where basically it allows you to market the contract technically, but market the deal without having a license, right? So you sign a contract there, and then if you don't have any buyers, you then use a disposition wholesaler to sell the deal, right? Then you're just like the middle of the middlemen, and you just deal with the relationships in that deal. You'd be like the middle of the 3 assignment fees that end up on the settlement statement.
Right.
That's technically what micro flipping is. when I told you about micro flipping, what we do is we do some traditional micro flips, which is that. But probably the vast majority of what we do is agent outreach. So those are most of our direct deals. And then disposition wholesaling, because now we have a cash buyers list, like a real cash buyers list of probably about like 2,000 to 3,000 in the Northern California area.
Yeah.
And then we have like another 500 dispo wholesalers who we use to sell our deals if we're having trouble there. And so because we have such a large cash buyers list, usually it's our direct cash buyers, but there are a few wholesalers who actually sometimes still get us deals.
Yeah.
So another way to say it would be like the JV model, like where like we have a JV business where people come to me from my social media, from my influence in these communities, and they know me as like Northern California and now Colorado, and they know they can send me deals and I'm going to get them sold, right?
Right.
Because they've seen my track record. So another way to say it would be like the JV model, but that's kind of like more or less how I'm making that business.
Yeah. It's a fascinating model, right? Like you look at the evolution, and I've said this to Jamil. It's funny what you created, right? Because like on the original situation was if you're a flipper, you gotta go direct to seller.
Mm-hmm.
You got to find the homeowner and market to them, reach out to them, connect with them, buy their house, and list it.
Right.
And then eventually it was like, well, we can do wholesaling and flipping. Right. So as a wholesaler, you reach out to the homeowner and then you sell it to the flipper. Right. So it's just one assignment fee. And then co-wholesaling comes along.
Yep.
Right. So you got one person who's talking to the homeowner.
Yep.
One person that's talking to the buyers. Right. And so the acquisition wholesaler will sell to the disposition wholesaler.
Yep.
And now we're saying we're creating one more segment in between.
Another one.
So between the acquisition wholesaler and the disposition wholesaler, there's a micro flipper.
You would be shocked. I've done one where there were 7 wholesalers
Oh, yeah,
on a deal
I've been a part of
before.
those too.
It's so funny. It's like, wow, it took that long to find the guy who was supposed to buy this deal. But in the end, who cares if everyone's getting paid and the buyer's happy? Like, that's all that really matters in the end.
And the title company cares.
Well, the title company sometimes cares. If you have a bad title company that cares, I mean, my title company in California would always do whatever I say at this point. Since
They'll do what they have to do.
Yeah.
But the stress.
Look at the settlement statement.
Right? Because if you look at the transaction, right? You have a buyer and seller. Okay, there's 2 parties.
Yeah.
Right? So a traditional deal, right? You got buyer, seller, listing agent, buyer's agent, loan officer, right? Like that's like the dynamic.
Yeah.
When we get to wholesaling, it's funny, right? You got A to B and B to C and C to D, right? And then we got to keep every communication separate.
Yeah.
And then the hard money lender,
Yeah.
right? And then like, what can you disclose? Up the chain, down the chain.
Yeah. I could imagine that. Like, honestly, that 7-person one, it was like, I didn't know everybody on that transaction, but we kind of just were like, this is ridiculous. We're just going to, you guys, we have all our assignments, so we know we're going to get paid. We're just going to put the AC and dispo and make this a little bit simpler and have them deal with most of it.
Right.
I was like number 4 on that one. I was either number 4 or number 5. But yeah, I mean, it is kind of crazy how it's changed. Or like, I mean, I wasn't in the game before when it was just flippers trying to get deals, but it is crazy how that can be a business model, but you are adding value to the marketplace in the sense that you're helping find the person who's actually going to close and bring
I don't
money.
think we need to justify it. It's just, for me, it's just amusing
Hilarious.
interaction, right? Right? Because like we have, what do we have in our market, right? We got in Phoenix. So we got Jamil Pakigli.
Yeah.
We got Chris Iman.
Yeah.
Right. And we got Spencer Caldwell. Like there's like multiple dispo houses.
Yep.
Right. And then you got all these realtors, and then you got the micro flipping, right? Like I got a deal. Like someone says to me, deal, like I don't know, I don't want it, but if you want, I can make a couple calls, and then it's just a couple of calls, right? Matthew Potter, who our host for PTD, right, Part of the Disruption, is like, hey, will your fund buy this? Like, that's my first call. Will your fund buy this? That's always my first call.
Interesting.
Right. So yeah, it's an interesting model. I there's no judgment on my end. I
love it.
Fascinating.
I love it. I think I think wholesaling in general is just the best business model ever. And there's just so many good ways of making money, especially when you don't have money. And that's also a great way if you don't have any money too.
Yeah.
That one wasn't for me. I liked agent outreach more. But once I partnered with Tyler, we really ramped that up. And also it made sense with my social media too. To be like, okay, let's actually use this to generate some leads.
So let's talk about that, right? Because I met you at Pace's Mastermind.
I remember that.
And what was the What did we talk about at that event?
You guys talked all about social media and the importance of it. So before that event, my mindset about social media was I don't want to be vain. I don't want to be bragging about all this money that I'm making. What are people going to think of me? How is it going to like affect how like everything in my life works? I mean, it works for these guys. They're doing great and all of that, but like they really want to, like I'm gonna be honest, and I don't know if Pace will ever see this, but I was like, it's probably because of like a little part of me was saying this, like probably he wants to boost his own ego. That's probably why he's doing it. But then I went to that event.
There's an element where it feels pretentious.
Exactly. That's how I used to think.
Yeah.
Right. I didn't understand quite a few different things. One was it boosts everything in your business.
Mm-hmm.
Literally everything becomes easier. It's easier to find deals. It's easier if you want to hire people. It's easier to raise private money. It's literally easier to do everything in this business if you have a social media presence. And then something also that I think Pace said at that mastermind that really hit me was I think he literally said this directly to me, was like, Jonah, do you feel like you could teach someone to make $50,000 a month? I'm like, yeah, probably. That's kind of what I do. And he's like, how dare you keep that to yourself when you could be teaching the world and helping others achieve that? How dare you keep that and be selfish and have mindset issues that prevent you from helping others achieve their dreams? And then once he said that, again, it's just a whole mindset shift of like, oh, God damn it. This has nothing to, it has nothing to do with me. It has nothing to do with the vanity. It has nothing to do with the, with like pretentiousness. Who cares what other people think? The whole point of it in the end is to be able to help others learn how to make millions upon millions of dollars, right? And it made so much sense especially when it was like, who helped me, like, especially at the very, very beginning, learn how to make millions and millions of dollars. It was you, right?
Mm-hmm.
From the Real Estate Disruptors podcast, listening to all those podcasts and all these people doing more than me, it was inspiring. It gave me ideas of like what I should be buying, what I should be doing, right? And so once I did that, it was super important. And then also at that event, it was that, and then it was also talking a lot about podcasts, right? And obviously, since you're most known for Real Estate Disruptors. Pace basically challenged all of us to start a podcast, and I ended up starting a podcast. I'm wearing my hoodie from it. It's called Scorch the Fears. It's on my YouTube channel, right? You were a guest on it. Pace, Jamil, all of them have been guests on it. And it is easily one of the best things I've done, just because, like, I don't think it's personally helped me, it hasn't helped grow my social media. It has, but not an insane amount yet. What it has done, though, is it's helped me connect with people who are way ahead of me, like you, Pace. I've now had Kent Clothier on there, Austin Zabak. I've had, who else have I had on that was really cool? Just all sorts of cool people, Vina Jetty, like all sorts of really cool people who are definitely above me. Mm-hmm. And now I have all of their phone numbers,
right? Or
or at least they'll respond to most of my DMs, right? And now it creates opportunities where I can come on to their podcast, right? Mm-hmm. That's why, like, I think one of the main reasons why I was able to get on this podcast is obviously like the minimum requirements, but also part of it was that I met you at that mastermind, you were on my podcast, and so there's actually like a connection made there.
Right.
Gives an excuse to meet people who are way more successful than you.
Yeah, and that's definitely been my experience as well. Right?
Yeah,
we were talking before the podcast, like, you're asking about how long I've done it. It's like, it was back in 2018. It was the best thing I've ever done for my business.
Yeah.
Right. So for those of you guys watching, like, this was, when did you start this?
2020.
2020.
Oh, wait, sorry. The podcast?
Yeah. When was the mastermind that I was at Pace's event?
That was the end of 2021.
End of 2021, right?
Yeah.
So not even 2 years.
Yeah.
Right. So for everyone watching, like, it's not too late to start. Like,
yeah.
It always feels it's too late. Like, when I started mine, I was like, oh, you got Joe McCall out there. You got Sean Terry. You got this Terrio guy, Matt Terrio. Like, you got Bigger Pockets. Like, there's no, like, why would anyone listen to Real Estate?
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's the story I was telling myself.
Yeah.
Right. And I talked to Joe McCall. He was like, yeah, when I started my podcast, there's Sean Terry out there. Why would anyone listen to me? So you start yours in 2021.
Yeah.
And it's already done all this for you. So for everyone watching, I've been saying this for a long time. Do it.
Yeah.
Put yourself out there. And I remember that mastermind specifically, the things that stuck out was you, Ingrid, right? And then there was a guy that was a church guy. I don't know if he ever started his podcast, but
I
he
don't
was
remember.
uh,
Church guy.
uh,
It was
it was someone that he was super religious, and he was they were talking about how he wanted to add. I can't remember exactly what it was. I just remember he was a person that went to church a lot, and he thought there was a lot of value in talking about religion, real estate, and this and that. So
don't
obviously that part was not as memorable for you.
know.
It's okay,
Sorry.
right? But those are the three I remember though, right?
Yeah.
Because he challenged the entire room.
Right.
Challenged the entire room. He
Yep.
made you guys come up with podcast idea, come up with titles,
Yep.
right? And a commitment and when you'll start this by. Like
Yep.
that's what I remember.
Yep.
And I remember you and Ingrid specifically, and then this other guy, I can't remember his name. But it's awesome to see this, that you did it, and then the consequence, the results of actually taking that action.
It's pretty cool. I mean, we're on this week will be episode 99. Next week, Thanksgiving week, will be episode 100. I've missed 1 week. I think I missed one Christmas because it was just getting way too crazy with the holidays. But that was the only week I've missed since that podcast of Scorch the Fears, right? Because I knew, I was like, I can beat everyone by just being consistent, like literally doing this every week. I'm going to beat 99% of the room. I'm going to beat almost everybody in that room. The only other person who was in that room who started a podcast that is still going on was Ingrid, I think. That's why you remember her. And she also works in the office. But like
Ingrid and I go back, so.
Yeah, that too, probably. But yeah, like it was, because what really hit me was when Pace said that about like, you are hurting other people by not doing it. That was like, okay, now I have to do it, right?
Right.
Back then, I didn't really understand. Like, I did understand the benefits. Like, you guys had said that you'll get more private money, more deals, all of that good stuff. But I still didn't know how to utilize that into a podcast format. Like, I was just kind of doing the podcast at the beginning because I'm just like, let's just do something and see what the hell happens. If you're going to ask me what 2024, like my vision for what the year of 2024 is going to be, it's going to be the year that I become famous is like my goal. Like that's the year where now I'm starting to understand, okay, we should pay a social media manager. We should actually make this professional. We should have an idea of, okay, when I do this reel, how is this going to feed back into the entire ecosystem of my businesses so that it helps my businesses intentionally, right? Still always give everything out for free, but then also give it out for free and make a method where it can come back to me at the same time. Because what I was doing was just putting out content. I had no strategy behind how to make it where like people could obviously send me deals, but there wasn't like a specific platform of like, here's how you should get deals from me. Here's what I'm kind of looking for, what areas, and here's how you can send it to my team, right? And the same thing with private money and same thing with all the other things that I wanted. I just was kind of like, I know I need to do this because Steve and Pace are doing it, basically.
Yeah.
So now I've started to become way more strategic with it, releasing reels. I've just started creating more long-form YouTube videos. I'm still behind on that. It's most of my YouTube channel is my podcast, but I'm starting to create more of that as well. And I'm getting to that point where I can get freed up from my business so that I'm able to do that. So that's my prediction for 2024 is
That's
it's the
pretty
year
cool.
that I become famous.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So Scorch the Fears podcast.
Mm-hmm.
What's the podcast about?
So the whole point of the podcast, it's all about how do you overcome fears just in general, right? The idea is I'm going to go interview people who are insanely successful, way even better than me, and people who have overcame whatever fears they were initially dealing with in order to become successful and whatever fears they're dealing with now and how they go through those. That's the whole point of the podcast because I felt like that's constantly what screws everyone up. It's something that I think is talked about constantly. 80 to 90% of this business is just mindset. When people say that, people don't understand that it's like, I think what mostly holds people back are fears of something. Fears of being judged. That was the whole thing that was holding me back from making any social media. Or fears of having people envy me. Fears of not being successful. That would be like a very common one at the beginning. Or fears of spending money. That really held me back. That's why in 2021, it was just me and one VA because I was like, I'd always grown up with save for a rainy day. right? Then I realized it's like, okay, yes, it is scary spending more than like 10K a month, but how the hell am I going to get to $2 million in revenue unless I'm willing to spend like 30 or 40 or 50K a month or something, right?
Right.
So I just started realizing that like all these different fears were always, once I conquered the fear or realized why it was stupid, that's when I would break through whatever level of business I was in. So
Yeah.
that's why I started that this was the podcast that spoke to me the most, was because like there are all these ones where people are interviewing each other, but on mine, and I still am interviewing people and I still get their story too, but I really want to like try to delve in as much as like, how do you overcome fears? How do you overcome mindset barriers in general? And what were the ones you were dealing with? And then also, how did you specifically overcome them? Because I've gotten all sorts of cool ideas for myself as well. I had a podcast maybe a month ago with a guy named Tyler DeVraw, I think is how you say his last name, big multifamily guy in Hawaii. And he gave me like a really good idea of like how he did it, which was he literally wrote out his entire story, right? And I've just started doing that, but I really feel like that one specifically is going to help a lot, being like, okay, let's actually write it out. Because when you write something out, it's very similar to envisioning, but it's also kind of mixed with planning. But I just get insanely good ideas like that for helping myself on how to overcome my fears too.
When you're talking about writing out your story, you're talking about in the past and the future?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I've seen like, a letter to myself, right? Like that kind
Yeah.
of stuff in the future. I think that is extremely powerful because we're cementing our reality,
Yeah.
our future reality today,
Yeah.
right? If we can't articulate it, how could we possibly achieve it?
Yeah.
So I'll ask you the same question people ask me. Your podcast, what were the 3 biggest things you've taken away from your guests in running the podcast?
Ooh, that's a really good one. I would say, it's going to be interesting to think of 3 off the top of my head. I would say probably one of the biggest things, this is just a human one, is it is insane how everyone is dealing with the exact same things. I was like, wow, it seems like I've had 15 guests who really had a fear of not being successful. Interesting, right? And so that's one that's really boosted my confidence. This is something I talk with people a lot about. Where does confidence come from? At least personally, for me, my confidence has come from realizing that everyone's insecure. Once I realized that, then I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I'm not the only a-hole in here who's insecure, right? Everyone around me is insecure. It doesn't matter who you are. I don't care how famous you are. You have the same insecurities. It just doesn't show as much. But that's the only difference between a confident person and a really not confident person, is someone is constantly showing their insecurities or constantly thinking about them. The other one knows that everyone's insecure, so we might as well just get stuff done, right? I think that was like a lesson I learned from my podcast, just because I was like, it was so funny how like the same ones kept popping up over and over and over and over again. Another one, they're just like, another one when I think of is just like the different techniques people used are really cool. Like one example being like writing the story. I'm trying to think of like other ones. I think like other ones that would happen were like, one, just like Pace said that to me about the social media thing, and it was because someone else said it to him, right? And I remember talking to him about that on the podcast, that was like a really interesting story to hear. So if you go into onto my YouTube channel and see the one I did with Pace, it's really interesting hearing that story. I'm trying to think of like a really good third one. I think the first one was like the thing that I've learned the most from. I'd say here's the third one, right? And this is not exactly from my guests. It's from just the podcast in general. So I hope you'll count this into this because it's that it is, and this might connect to the first one, so I might give you a fourth one if you want it. But I think it's fascinating because I had such like, when I started that podcast, I had such like why would Steve Trang ever come onto my podcast?
Yeah.
Who the hell am I, right? I just started this podcast. I've been in it 5 episodes, right? Like I could get Jamil and Pace because they love me because I'm their mentees, right? But then I had like a mindset shift talking to a really good friend of mine named Sam Singh. I don't know if you know him. You might know him.
I was on his show too.
Oh, nice. Cool. And he just told me, it's like, no, dude, just ask them. I'm like, what do you mean just ask them? You can just ask them? You You just ask them to come on the podcast? And it's like, yeah, they'll come on. It's like, what do you mean they'll just come on? It's like, dude, just ask them. Like, watch what happens. And the first person I asked is Brent Daniels. And Brent Daniels was like, yeah, I'll come on the podcast. I'm like, what? You don't even know me. And I'm like, just some random wholesaler. But then they're like really cool dudes. And that kind of ties into the first one where it goes back to like, really, none of us are all that different. Some people, obviously, I'd probably say 20%, probably when I ask more famous people than me to come onto my podcast, probably like 20 to 30% say yes and 70% ignore me. But I realized really all you need is that 20 to 30% to have like a really interesting podcast. And so I feel like those are the three most
Well, if I recall
meaningful
correctly
things.
as well, you asked me at Pace's event.
I asked you at Jamil's event later.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I asked you later, and you said, sure, in person. Then you ignored me for a while, and then I'm like, all right, I've got to. No, he said yes. I'm gonna keep freaking texting him until he responds.
Well, and that's what it takes.
Yeah.
That's what it takes, right? Because if I say yes, I'll do it.
Yeah.
The biggest thing is the having my team reply back in the DMs.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the greatest challenge. So I'll be totally honest. Like the replying back to DMs has been an inconsistent process within my organization.
Right.
Because it's not me. Right.
Yeah.
Like it's just not. Like
Yeah.
if you get a reply on a weekend, it's me.
Right.
Right. But the other 5 days, it's the team.
Gotcha.
And so I'll own it. Right. It's just we have been completely inconsistent.
No, it's okay. I honestly, like.
Well, I'm saying this for everyone else that feels like I'm ignoring you. It's just we're inconsistent.
That's fair. That's fair. But no, I mean, like, yeah, and learning that, like, I've just also learned, like, yeah, like if somebody says yes, like I probably in the past would have been gun shy. I'm like, oh, maybe he changed his mind. Maybe he was just being polite in the moment. But I've learned just like, no, just keep asking. Like, just see what happens. Because like 9 times out of 10, if they say they do it, they probably will do it. Probably just busy at that moment, and that was what it was. And then you eventually came on.
And the reality is that number 3 thing that you figured out has been around for a long time, right?
Yeah.
Like that's how Napoleon Hill wrote Think and Grow Rich.
Yep.
This is how like back in the day when I was doing my own SEO, this is the way I would do it. It's just I would just interview other top bloggers and just put it as a link, and they all say yes as long as you'll link back to my page.
Nice.
Right. So when I started this podcast, I had every expectation that everyone would say yes, because in my experience, who doesn't want to have their ego stroked?
Yep.
Right. Everyone wants their ego stroked, whether they admit it or not.
Yep.
They want that. So,
yep.
So, and then again, for everyone else, right? Like reach out to Jonah, reach out to me. Yeah. Like, the answer is yes, we'll do it.
I will literally go on any podcast. If you're watching this and you have a podcast, I will go on it, because like I said, my year 2024 is is the year where I become famous, and to become famous, you got to get your face out there as much as possible. Right.
So one of the things you're talking about is a lot of people face insecurity, right? So then I think that the flip side of insecurity then is the imposter syndrome.
Yep.
So are you finding that a lot of people mentioning that they struggle with imposter syndrome?
100%. Yeah. No, I mean, I won't name names because I feel bad. Like, even though they
you have to listen to all 300 episodes.
Yeah, you have to listen to all 99 episodes. There were definitely like people. It's insane. There was like one person who's like almost done $1 billion in multifamily deals, and they were telling me and I've become really good friends with them now, and they were telling me like, yeah, like I just don't like what if I teach somebody something and then they like lose money? And I'm like, I'm not gonna say their name. I'm gonna be like, blank. It's real estate investing. They're going to lose money at some point. That's actually like a requirement, is for them to at some point lose some freaking money. Like there's no way to do business without losing money. Right?
It's called an investment.
Yeah, it's called an investment. Like sometimes it goes poorly, right? So it was just really interesting. And like that person was dealing with it like now at like their level at this moment. And it was just that was fascinating to me, in the sense of like, man, like it just kept reinforcing that like we really all do deal with the same things.
Well, some of the most successful people I know struggle with imposter syndrome, which makes no sense to me.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Because like, you've done it.
Yeah, it's not like you didn't do it, right?
It's not like I don't deserve it. It's like you've done it.
Yeah.
Right. So another thing, you mentioned confidence. So I got a chance to listen to it was Tom Bilyeu. It's Impact Theory,
Mhm.
right, where he interviews, I think it's Andrew Bustamante, I believe is the guy's name, CIA agent. And he makes a statement I've never heard anyone else say before,
Hmm.
is that confidence is not a real thing.
Okay.
Confidence doesn't exist, right? It's like, that's an interesting concept. So given that you've talked to all these people, what are your thoughts on that?
Does confidence exist? Did he mean like it's not tangible, or did he mean it literally doesn't exist at all?
It's impossible to quantify, right? Which I mean, I think we can agree on that. It's
Yeah,
impossible to
yeah,
quantify.
yeah,
But like, what does it even, right? Either they can do it or they can't. That's the reality.
yeah. True. That's a very interesting idea. Is confidence just not even real? In my head, it's not tangible. So, like when I say tangible versus real, it's like so. I would consider it one of those things where it is. Um, it's like real because its effects are real, if that makes sense, is how I would think
Perception
of it.
affects reality. Or
Exactly.
perception is reality. Yeah.
So you're right. Confidence, I would say, so here's where I agree ish and disagree ish. So I would agree in the sense that confidence itself by itself isn't real, but it becomes real because of the effects on your life. So, for example, right, I have seen people, and I've done it with myself, who literally can become more confident by saying, like, into a mirror, I am confident, I am strong, like doing daily affirmations. I've seen it happen where somebody actually gets a teensy bit more confident from that, right? That then creates an effect where maybe they close a deal that they wouldn't have closed, right? That then compounds onto like, wait, that did actually create something, right? And so, like physically saying into a mirror, I'm confident, isn't really real, but because it creates an effect on reality by doing something that makes you more confident, that makes it real. I don't know if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
It makes sense.
Exactly.
So when I got married, right, my best friend was my best man.
Mhm.
And he said that my thing, there's one way he could describe me, confidence.
Yeah.
Right. And I said with you, right, I'm irrationally confident. And like, I remember we had a conversation like back in college, like there's one thing I could pass on to my kids. It's confidence.
Yeah.
Because with confidence, everything else works
Yeah.
itself out.
Everything figures itself out.
Right. And so what is confidence? Confidence is the belief that I'll figure it out. So then I wonder, is it because I have this belief that I'll figure it out that I'm willing to persist further until it's figured out?
Right.
Whereas if I don't have the confidence to figure it out, then I might not persist as long.
Yep.
Right. Because there are things I've done, like, is that a really good idea? Was I qualified to do that? Maybe not. But I did it
Yeah.
because I told myself or others that I was going to get it done.
100%. No, I 100% agree with that. Like it's just one of those things where like if your belief in your ability to do it makes it 10 times more likely that you're able to do it. And that's the belief is the confidence, right? There's sometimes unfounded confidence and there's sometimes confidence where it's like, okay, I actually have some evidence behind it. But having that belief either way, like without it, you have 0% chance of success.
Yeah.
You have literally no chance of success because like the Michael Jordan quote, like you what is it? Like you have to shoot at blanking right now. You have to like every shot. I'm gonna blank on the quote. More or less that it just has to be like if you believe in what you're doing, then it actually becomes possible because you're actually gonna try. And so it's almost like the base rock for being able to be successful.
Yeah. Definitely got to get him on the show and talk to him about this.
Yeah, that would be cool.
I do have a lot of unfounded confidence, but it all works itself out.
Right.
So you're doing a challenge next month.
I am. So not next month, in 2 weeks.
Okay.
So I'm doing a challenge where
It should be just in time when the show comes out. So when you listen to the show, it's coming out now.
It's probably coming out now. So it'll be the week after Thanksgiving. I'll be doing a challenge where I will be going every single day as an acquisition manager I'm going to become an acquisition manager in my company. Because a lot of people have been asking me things related to scaling, like what does like an actual organization look like? Right. So I was thinking, okay, that's the job I'm going to do as an acquisition manager. So I was thinking, let's go through it. I'm going to be an acquisition manager. I'm just going to do a Zoom where the people who sign up, they can come in, I'm going to share my screen. They're going to hear everything that I'm doing constantly. They're able to watch. They're able to hear me close deals. They're able to see how an organization is run, so that then they can like actually visualize it. Because I think one of the hardest things that I had to deal with creating an organization is like, I didn't really ever get to see the insides of a working organization. I've never had a true corporate job ever. I've had like the W-2s I've had, I was like a server at a restaurant or something like that. So the closest thing I'd ever gone to was like masterminds with like where Pace and Jamil would show their systems and stuff like that. I think it's super different if people can get to see like it being lived through, right? So yeah, that's the challenge I'm doing. If you guys are interested, just go to the link in my bio on Instagram. My name's just Jonah Korchin. It's in the title of this podcast. You can find it there. You can click the link in the bio, and then you'll see like the agent. It's like the acquisition manager challenge or something like that. It's the first one. So
Gotcha.
yeah.
So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, it'll be fun. I'm excited for that too. That's gonna be great.
So what is your why? What drives you?
So I have many different whys, right? There are the typical whys that are the really uninteresting whys, in my opinion, like being able to pay for all of my family, being able to travel, yada, yada, all that stuff. The why that's really come into existence, though, as I've hung out with more people like you, like Brent Daniels, like Pace Morby, like Jamil, is impact. I'm starting to get addicted to the fact that people DM me and are like, Jonah, I watched your reel, I watched your YouTube video, and I was able to get my first deal from it. Thank you so much. I just made $20,000, right? Things like that are starting to, it's just so fun. It's just so cool to see, right? Or they get their first deal through my company, right? And like we do a JV deal, and then like that's their first $5,000 check, because it's cool making money. I like making money, don't get me wrong. But it's not like I get that same spiritual feeling from a $10,000 wholesale deal like I did when I got my first deal. When I got my first deal, I literally had the check in front of me. I was like, I'm gonna go to the office. I need to see this thing is real. I don't want to wire. I don't want to send it to the wrong bank account. I need this check in my hands. I remember getting the check and then sitting outside in my car and just being like, holy moly, this is real. This is real. It's like in my hand right now, $10,000. And being able to give that feeling to other people, I'm starting to get addicted to. And because of that, that's starting to become my true why, is like, how many people can I impact before I die? I'm 28. I've got a good 40 years in me. So how many people can I help become millionaires? How many people can I help become billionaires? How many people can I help get their first deal? How many people can I make financially successful? And how many people can I help them deal with mindset issues, right? And because of that, that's starting to become my true why, is like how it's like that in the mix of like, how good of a person can I become? Can I be the best son ever? Could I eventually be the best husband ever? Could I become the best man possibly, right? Because why not be the best at everything that I possibly can become? So because of that, also, like with the entrepreneurship, it's like, let's become as rich as I possibly can. Let's become as faithful as I possibly can. Let's become as kind and generous as I possibly can. Let's make an insanely cool organization so that it can have all of this impact on everyone around me.
Yeah.
And so that's become the true why as I've evolved out of needing money and needing other things.
Yeah, that's that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Like you're now chasing impact and significance, which I totally get, because like until 2013, for me, it was all about the money.
Right.
And then you start seeing success around other people attributable to you. It's like, damn, that feels really good.
Yeah.
Let's do more of that.
100%.
Yeah. I haven't found anything more satisfying than watching someone win. So
Literally. Like I remember when my first act manager got his first 100K deal, and I'm like, wow, that is a really good feeling. That was like the best feeling ever, because I'd never, because that was like, obviously they had something to do with it, but then also I was like, damn, I can teach people to do this too. So it was a mix of helping them and helping me.
What's your biggest struggle today?
My biggest struggle today, I would say, is how can I grow my organization without me ever getting back into it? So what I'm right now, my biggest struggle that I've been dealing with is I'm have like about a team of 10 right now, maybe 4 or 5 VAs, TC, 2 act managers, hopefully going to hire a third one, dispo manager, right? All these roles. What keeps blocking me, and I've thought about different ways of how to solve it is, for instance, at the beginning in June, we had one act manager. He closed all 300 because he was like amazing. He was just a G. He was like a great guy, right? And then, I hire 2 more act managers. They start coming in, and then that first guy left because he was like, "Hey, Jonah, it's been great. Learned everything. I'm out. Peace." Right? He didn't say it like that. He was like really wanted to keep a good relationship. But I'm realizing my business is vulnerable in the sense that there's like an in-between point where it's like scaled out enough where like if one person leaves, somebody could take their role. Right now, I'm still at that vulnerable point where if someone leaves, either I or Tyler, my business partner, then has to become that role. Luckily, we already had 2 act managers, so it worked out there. But for instance, our TC left just because she was like all commission and she got like offered a $150K job doing like software or something or other. I don't know what it was. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to compete with that as a TC. Like, good for you, right? Like, I'm never going to pay a TC $150K a year, right? So my biggest struggle, I would say, is how do I make it where my business is always has a backup where it never comes back to me or Tyler? And then that's one. And then 2, in the sense of how am I going to open up a new market where it's done from like the top down, right? I keep hearing about this, how I should hire a I don't know what to call it, either a COO or an ops manager, or like maybe somebody who's like a admin person for that market who manages a market, and then everyone is hired beneath it, right? Like, how do I do that? I have no idea. How I built the first market was bottom up, right? And I just hire people slowly and then go up. So those are like the 2 biggest problems that I've been thinking about.
Who's suggesting that?
Other people. I don't know. Do you think that's a bad idea?
It's an interesting idea.
Yeah. Who was suggesting that? Some of my friends who have done it before, like Sam was one person who suggested it. There was someone other than Sam. I'm trying to
Because like
remember.
that's how you would run it. Like if you start a new business, that's how you would start it. Right?
Yeah.
For sure, that's how you start it. For me, I think it's interesting because to start another market, I would probably take some of the. If we're making enough profit here, then we would take some of that profit to invest in another market. Where I don't know. I would build it from the bottom up.
You build it from the bottom up?
Yeah, because you already have the marketing figured out. You already have the TC market figured out, right? So what were the differences, right? It's that the marketing would have to change for the market. The TC would have to change a little bit for the market, right? Because the processing would be different. It was escrow state, attorney state. There's some subtle tweaks, but to make a whole new unit from the top, that scares me.
Yeah.
Right?
I don't know. It's a very expensive way to do it. And I was thinking about
and you have to hire a killer from day one.
Yeah, you do have to hire a killer from day one.
And if you make the wrong hire there, it's dead.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just hard because it's like, it's like, okay, here's the thing though. Like if I hire from the bottom up, then let's say, okay, I go into that market, I got to hire at least 1 act manager, ideally 2. Maybe we'll need a new TC. I don't know. I don't know if there would need to be another TC or if a TC could handle that. And then I'd have to hire 2 VAs under them. And then I would either have to hire a dispo manager or have a very competent dispo wholesaler. But I get scared with relying only on dispo wholesalers, right? So for it to really work, I'd have to hire those at least 5 people at once, 5 or 6 people at once, right? And at least how I've been doing the act manager stuff now, and you can tell me your opinion on this. This is how Brent does it, and I've started copying Brent on this, was he has it where he more or less is like willing to overpay his act managers. He does like a salary and a commission. He does $70K base, 6% commission, right? Which hiring two act managers and a dispo manager would end up being pretty expensive. And so I just have to do it right? So I don't know. It's just like it's just like an interesting thing of like, is that really how it should be done? Is just hire everyone immediately. And then also now we have 6 more employees to manage, right? Out of the blue. We just like almost doubled the employee workforce. So just an interesting thing to think about like what's the right way to do it.
Yeah. So I recommend a couple different resources. There's Rigging the Game, the book.
Okay.
Probably check that out.
Can I bring out my phone and write it down?
Sure. And then we have another podcast, Certainty Talks, right? Where
Okay.
Paul and I, we talk a lot about like what's the next step that you can take that sends you that direction with as little risk as possible.
What was the name of the book?
Rigging the Game.
Rigging the Game. I'll read it.
Yeah.
And Certainty Talks. That's your another podcast?
Yeah.
Is that what you said?
Yeah. It's all under Real Estate Disruptors.
Okay.
Yeah. So then, what is your superpower?
My superpower. Sorry, I was just writing that down. My superpower, I think, this is something that I've started doing way better than I think a lot of people. I could say things like being able to communicate, being able to close deals, all that stuff. I think a lot of people have that superpower though.
Mhm.
I don't think it's truly what I do better than anybody else. What I think I do better than anybody that I've seen is the appreciation now, because I've realized how important it is. I think I'm really good at overwhelming people with appreciation over and over and over again. Like if you ask my AC managers or really any of my employees, that's always how I end the conversation. No matter, even if I was mad at them, even if I I mean, I don't do this, but like, even if I was to yell at them, I would never yell at them though. So it doesn't matter. But like, even if I was like to have like a confrontation about something with them, I'd be like, by the way, you guys are killers. You guys are absolutely amazing. Keep crushing it. Right. Because I've realized truly that's what we're missing. I think one of the biggest things we miss in our society, and I think it's what most people want, not more than anything else, but like one of the key things that people want, and they just don't get it.
They don't.
So I've been really, I feel like that's now my biggest superpower. That's different than other people's superpowers. Like because people will hear that, people are going to watch this podcast and then they're going to forget. Like tomorrow, they're going to be like, and forget to do the appreciation thing.
Yeah.
But I'm going to keep doing it forever. So
yeah, that's huge. And it's so profoundly effective because it is what people want. A lot of people yearn for it.
And it's so cheap to give. It's insanely cheap to give.
Yeah.
Right? Like actually takes you 5 seconds to be like, I appreciate you so much. Thank you. The waitress, the waiter, not just your employees, everyone. If you can do it to everyone, not just to Steve Trang because he had me on his podcast, to the people that are just like doing basic things to you as well, you'll start seeing it change your life.
Absolutely. What's your biggest regret?
My biggest regret. That's an interesting one. Really, I don't really like. There are things that I can say that I regret, but in the end, I'm really happy that it happened that way, because if it didn't happen that way, then I wouldn't be where I am right now, right? If I had to say my biggest regret, especially in terms of business, I would say it was, I don't know. I've been pretty good with business though. So like I would say my biggest regret, if I had to choose one, would have been partnering up with Tyler earlier. I had been partnering up with Tyler literally January of 2023, but there was like a whole thing where I was like, I kept hearing from people, don't partner up. It's a bad idea, right? Like all of this stuff. And then I eventually realized like in the end, it's my life.
Yeah.
I got to choose what's right for me. And even if there were a lot of people around me telling me not to do it, Pace was the only one who told me to do it. Very funny enough. Everyone else was just telling me, don't do it, blah, 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 blah. But in the end, my gut kept coming back to it. Like literally my intuition was like, everything wrong in your business is going to be solved by partnering up with him.
Right.
And so probably if I had to choose one, it would have been just being like, screw it, let's do it at the beginning of January instead of the beginning instead of like the beginning of June, because I think we would have had potentially like a $2 million year instead of a $1 million year if we had done that.
Well, Pace does have a really good partnership. So
yeah, he does.
Yeah.
He was part of it. And yeah. So
Sure. What book have you gifted more than any other?
what book have I gifted more than any other? Probably How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one that I've gifted the most to most people because it's a classic, obviously. Lots of people know it.
Right.
I just love that book because I think it's one of those books where you don't have to be a business person.
Mm-hmm.
I think like learning how to communicate and learning how to get what you want by giving first.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really what that book talks about is just like all the communication styles of how you should be dealing with other human beings in order to get the things that you want and do that and be able to have more friends and be able to convince people of how you're seeing things, right?
Right.
And I feel like that book for the vast majority of the population is super useful. A lot of the other books I read are really good, but much more geared towards business owners.
Mm-hmm.
So literally gifted, probably that book.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I want you to think about the last thoughts you want to leave all the listeners with. Make a quick announcement. Guys, if you have value today, again, please subscribe. Rising tide does lift all boats. We're trying to help as many people as we can. We do have our end of the year sales training. I believe it's December 8th. It's a virtual training. It's going to be a slightly discounted price. So if you guys have been on the fence at all on the training, keep an eye out. We'll be posting about it on social media. It's going to be, again, I think December 8th is the second Friday of December. So what are some last thoughts you want to leave everyone with?
I just want to say thank you, man. I said it was my superpower, so I'm going to do it. I appreciate you so much for having me on this podcast. It is pretty crazy. I have envisioned this moment coming onto this podcast for a very, very long time. I remember thinking about it when I was driving for dollars in my car, being like, man, I am one day going to be cool enough to be on this podcast. There will be a day where I'm on Real Estate Disruptors because I've created such a cool business that I'll be able to help other people out. Mm-hmm. And so I just want to appreciate making that dream a reality because I remember listening, having no money and just being like, okay, so that's how I do this. That's how I do this. I should use this program. Mm-hmm. Right. And so, yeah, man, I just want to end it with thank you for having me on. It's freaking awesome. It's cool that I'm finally got to be on it.
Yeah. Well, it's my pleasure. And that is the vision, right? For everyone that's listening, is one day they'll be on the other side and on the show. And we've had multiple people, right? First one that comes off the top of my mind is Keith Everett, but we've had he was the one who handed the plaque, right? We've had him on the show. We've had so many people that I look forward to one day being on the show. And every time it happens, it's so fulfilling. We were talking about earlier the why, right? For me, it's man, someone had this dream. The material we put out there helped them accomplish this dream so that they get to be on this side.
Yep. And it's just cool. It's cool because I know there's some kid out there listening who's driving for dollars, putting it on in their Scion XA, putting it on the freaking Spotify or iMusic or iTunes Music, and is just going to freaking crush it. And they're going to hear it and be like, no, I'm going to get on that freaking podcast eventually. So that's it. Awesome. I just appreciate you.
If somebody wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way?
So the best way to get a hold of me is just Instagram. It's my name. It's Jonah. I know they'll spell it in there. Jonah_Korchin. You can DM me. I'm constantly. I respond myself still to DMs. Right. I don't usually get on phone calls as much anymore. But any questions you guys got, DM me there. If you guys want to check out my YouTube channel, there's all sorts of cool agent outreach stuff going on there. Soon. You can also check out my podcast, Scorch the Fears, if you want to see. You can check out Steve on it. Steve's on there right now. And you can check out what Steve was afraid of when he was just starting out, if you guys are interested in that. So, yeah, that's the best way to reach out to me. Obviously, you can send me deals in Northern California, Colorado, too. I have Colorado open as well. And I'll buy creative financing deals anywhere. And, yeah, that's how you guys should reach out to me.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thanks, my man.
Appreciate it. Thank you guys for watching. See you guys next time.
Steve Trang. Jump on the Steve Trang. We real estate disruptors.